they devour glimpses, reveling in the memories.
This place is teeming with madmen who drank until they drowned their senses. Sip this, and you'll see. Yes, taste the truth. You know nothing of him yet.
Welcome to Mortal Shell, Souls-like indie game made in 2020 by Cold Cemetery, which is a studio consisting of a whopping 4 people, all of which seem to have worked on Ghost of Tsushima. That in its own right is pretty impressive, considering got this game done in about 3 years of dev. In general, Mortal Shell is a Souls clone through and through, from loading screens to basic combat, where you play as a foundling, known formerly as the alien from M. Night's Signs, with some unique mechanics for this game to offer to help stand on its own, like a shell-based cloud system and hardening. Hardening is the most interesting mechanic and one of this game's biggest gimmicks. It's one of the most unique gimmicks I've ever seen in an indie Souls game. You're able to become immune to most attacks while also freezing yourself mid-attack and becoming like a big porcupine and still getting damage off while not taking any yourself. It's almost like a parry. But it's not a parry, because we have a parry in this game, or you can be just like me and be completely distracted off the beginning of this game and go and explore and just not get the parry item for more than half the game. That's on me though. The parry system in this game is perfectly fine. It just leaves me as wondering why you would want to use it when you can just use the hardened system and always not take the damage and always get the hit if you do it correctly. Don't get me wrong, parrying has some cool things about it. Parrying gives you the ability to empower the riposte, making people explode via a tumor, or go into some weird infant raid, but also more importantly can give you a heal. This is one of the most integral parts of the game because this is the most reliable way to get any health back. Our other big gimmick of this game, like the hardening, is the shell system. Shells are human bodies that Science Jr. over here can possess to gain their attributes and their perks, and upon hitting fatal damage you can be ejected from these shells, and then you get your kind of last chance sort of deal like in Sekiro, and you try to get your shell back to reclaim its benefits and its health and its defenses. Or you can remain naked and squishy for the rest of the encounter. This is the entire game's answer for leveling and builds that you'd see in other Souls-likes. The first of these shells that we can come across is our average Joe here. His name is Haros. He is mid in literally every single stat you can have, being health, stamina, resolve, but that's not all, because every single shell gets their own set of perks. These perks can range from being strictly utility to being actually useful mid-combat. Haros here can specialize in hardening, having his cooldown reduced, and actually being able to get stamina to refill during hardening, being the only shell to do that. To unlock these abilities, you're going to need Tar and Glimpses. Now Tar, as you probably guessed with this, it's your Souls currency that you see in any Soulsborne. Yeah, it's your runes from Elden Ring. You die, they're stuck at where you died. If you die on the way getting to them, they're gone for good. Glimpses, however, it's the insight currency from Bloodborne, but it's only locked to the shell that you have. So if I pop 50 on Haros here, our other shells won't have the 50, but Haros will never lose the 50 glimpses that I popped on him. Now it's our Dex shell. His name is Teal the Acolyte. This was my favorite, used him basically for my entire playthrough. Literally though, has the worst health and the worst resolve out of all of the shells, But he has a stamina bar that is literally off the chain hook with a shadow step dodge. If you want to get out of the way, this is the man to pick. His perks, I also think, are one of the most useful, allowing him to have immunity to poison, allowing him to cause poison, or even allowing him to shrug off hits to where they hit the stamina bar instead of the health bar. That's just nuts to me. After our decks, of course, we have to go to the big tank, big man Aerodrim, the Burner Bro. I think I said that correctly. The man's a king. He has literally no stamina, but a health bar big as f***ing Texas. The perks, though, for this man has a stacking perk to where every time you kill something, you get a little bit of buff. You do a little bit more damage, but it lasts until you die. So you can theoretically one-shot things, I believe. Unless it has a hard cap that this game doesn't tell me, which it might. Or you can just increase his damage to poise or have his poise defense go up. It's pretty nuts. This man can stagger for days with a fast enough weapon. Biggest drawback, he can't swing that weapon a lot. His stamina is like small PP energy. This man gets 2 thrusts in. Our final shell, and did I say final? Yes, this game only has 4 shells. This game has a big hard-on, pun intended, for the number 4. There are 4 main bosses, 4 weapons, and 4 shells. I don't understand why the big theme of 4 exists, but this shell, however, is Solomon. Born on a Monday, Solomon has slightly better health and mid stamina, and also the most resolve. Now we can talk about resolve, as it's Solomon's whole shtick. Every shell gets between 2 and 5 bars of it. Solomon has 5, but can also perk up to having 6. Now what resolve actually does, it allows you to pull off certain abilities. Like the parry abilities we talked about earlier, the tumor implanting, the heal vamp, the infant child rage, those all cost 1 bar. Now weapon abilities, each weapon has 2, and conversely, each one of those weapon arts takes 2 resolve bars. The thing I hate about these is they do not scale off of weapon damage. So if I have a weapon that theoretically kills things in 1 hit, it builds little to no resolve. If I have a weapon that takes forever to kill something, it builds resolve like crazy. I hate that. So this is meant to be a whole momentum mechanic. If my momentum is fast, but I'm just killing things too fast, I'm not as rewarded as not being built. So my plus 10 mace is more useless in building resolve than my plus 1 weapon. Kinda stupid. The other thing I don't like, as it is a momentum-based bar, if you do not fill a bar up completely, say you get it to 90%, it will begin to drain if you run out of things to hit. Now since, you know, that's a mechanic that I didn't like, this is a mechanic that I love a lot, and it's a small one. There's a familiarity system in this game. And now what that is Souls' biggest problem that I feel is you never want to use items because you're always scared of using them and wasting them and then not working, blah, 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 la, la, la. Now, what familiarity does is you're allowed to level up these items to a familiarity level of 10. That is a very hard word to say, by the way. I'm going to start saying it. When you get these levels of familiarity to 10, the items get different benefits most of the time. Like my mushrooms that sucked at healing are now pretty good at healing, and they heal me pretty quickly. Also, these other mushrooms that just literally poisoned me for taking them started gaining me immunity to poison. This is really unique. It's the only Souls-like that has ever gotten me to use items. Now for weapons. As said before, there are only 4 weapons you can get in this game, and each of these weapons comes with 3 light attacks and 3 heavy attacks and a dash attack. The heavy and light attacks can be interchanged. For example, I use the mace a lot. The third heavy on the mace is a ground slam. To cheese that thing out earlier, I just spam 2 light attacks and then do the heavy. Now each weapon also has 2 specific weapon upgrades for it, besides the normal let's do more damage upgrade to gain access to the weapon arts. There's only 2 weapon arts per weapon. These can range from being buffs to a giant AoE to literally being the same thing twice, but one of them's on fire. The first weapon we come across with Average Joe is a hollowed sword. If you recognize the stance of this weapon, it's the DS Greatsword stance. And it's your basic sword. There's nothing really that special for it except for its weapon skills, which are also kind of lackluster because it's a spike, or for our second weapon art, it's also a spike but on fire.
That's bullshit. This whole thing is bullshit.
This is one of the lamest things I've seen. They could have gave it like a cannon or like a projectile. It would have been cool. Made it a flamethrower or something. You know, something cool. It's very It's the same thing twice, but one is literally red. What kind of shit is this, dude? The next weapon up is a hammer and chisel. This is our dex weapon. So design-wise, it's pretty gnarly, and you kind of enjoy it. It's a unique twist on the dual sword dex build you would see with poison instead of bleed on it. Also, it makes me feel like the best girl Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen, you know, throwing some nails and hammers and nails. The weapon arts, however, they're a little bit meh because the options are throwing a lot of nails or throwing one nail. On the bright side is the only ranged weapon art that we have. The last two weapons we get are the closest we get to.
Boss weapons! Did you say boss weapons? Boss weapons!
In the entire game. They're variants of two of the dungeon bosses that we fight. The first being the Martyred Sword Dude. It's a long, thirsty, thrusty boy, summed up in swish, swish, stab. It's a giant pokey sword with a big range, very small sweeps, but it thrusts. It has a double thrust in its moveset. That's pretty weird. And its weapon arts, you get a ice AoE that just freezes everything around you and doesn't does the damage, or you can buff it and drop the sword, pick it back up again. This animation looks so stupid to me. It makes me giggle every time. Then that buffs your heavy attacks to do a ice and freeze things to do even more damage. Our final weapon is my favorite boy, my big beating fire stick. It has a lot of stun to it and a lot of range. I enjoy it. It's the smoldering mace. It's the direct counter to the Martyr Sword. It's a fire AoE weapon. It has a fire AoE weapon art and a fire buff weapon art instead of an ice one. It's the same thing, but fire. And it's got sweeps and knockback. It's amazing. Now, not to spoil much, to find these weapons, you're gonna find them in the various boss dungeons. As soon as you enter, you're gonna see a statue that when you interact with it, it's gonna summon you to fight a Harden using that weapon. This is pretty awesome. The Harden is an NPC fight from Souls. It uses your Harden mechanic and all that jazz. It uses that weapon you're trying to unlock from it, showing you its combos, showing you its weapon art, showing how to use it with the Harden mechanic. Now that we got weapons out of the way, this game is separated into 3 dungeons. We got one for ice, one for fire, and one for obsidian slabs and weird teleporting mechanics. I didn't like that one. And then we have one huge connecting area with the hub in it. Now you could be like me, get really distracted by shinies and miss the whole hub tower for 2/3 of the game and go to a bad time, or you can get to that tower. When you actually get to that tower, it will give you a lot of information. It'll give you the location of shells, it'll give you the location of weapons, which are also the location of dungeons. Then it also gives you a crash course of most of the mechanics of the game that you didn't get in the tutorial. And you get the weapon for parrying, you get an item shot, you get to understand what leveling is and what upgrading weapons is. Oh my god, I didn't have this for 2/3 of the game, led to a bad time. For the design of all of the levels and all the areas of this game, Fallgrim is a really connected area. It was really nice. It connects to every single dungeon because, again, it's the main area. But there's not one way to get to each dungeon. You have 2 to 3 different ways through tunnels and normal pathing and weird, crazy shit behind things. It's not that bad. It's actually impressive. I'm like, huh, a Souls-like that actually uses shortcuts. Huh. Been a while. Looking at you, Deck 13. Looking at you. Now, if we go for the design of how things look, everything's pretty samey, and it screws with your mental map a lot. It's really easy to get lost in Fallgrim because there's so many different tunnels and so many different ways to get somewhere, and everything looks pretty much the same. It's just rotting wood. The dungeons, on the other hand, the fire and the ice ones are pretty simple. The ice one equates to going down. There's some little off-beaten paths. There's little tunnels for like an item in a room. But other than that, it's go down. The fire one, again, off-beating little items and small little doorways. But other than that, it's go in a circle. Actually, that one's go straight. You just go straight. You just treat that one like NASCAR. Just go left. You're good. The obsidian one is the most annoying one because that one is a puzzle with teleportation where you have to get these Well, they're not really keys. They're like lantern things. You touch them and then it opens up a door to a bigger door. Literally the playthrough you're seeing this on screen right now, this is only 1/3 of it. I didn't want to finish it because it annoyed me this much. Now we can get to the best part of this game. In all Souls-like games, it should be the best part and the most prioritized part in all of Souls-like game design, the motherfucking bosses. Sad news though, this game only has actually 4 bosses. Whoa, sites will say it's more than that, but it's really not, because the other 2 are just more of common enemies. One's you reuse literally 4 goddamn times. You're called Grecias. They're Wolverine on steroids. It's a bear that bites your face off. The only different is there's the Grecias in the poison world, which there are 2 of them, and then there's one in a cave, and then there's one that's encaged. There's literally no difference between their fighting other than the encaged one is locked out of one of its moves that is an insta-kill because it can't bite your head off. That is the only difference. Now for the 4 main bosses. Each dungeon we talked about has a boss. And then there's a final boss at the very end of the game. Now the dungeon bosses, it pains me to say this, they're actually not really good. I will show problems with all the bosses except for the ice one. The ice one by far, that dude is the best design boss. I really enjoy the way this man works. Look at him. He's like unthreatening and threatening at the same time. I never really know he's gonna come at me. Hardening makes him pretty easy though, because he kind of engages himself, so I just kind of do the porcupine strat, hit himself every time. It's better than all the other ones. I like this one a lot. However, Ice Boy is the only one I actually like out of the 4 main bosses, which honestly, a score of 1 out of 4, not good, not boding good for you. Our next boy, Fire Boy, he underlies a huge issue in most of this game. Most enemies have an animation cancel, and that I hate. I've never seen a Souls game give the enemies animation canceling. It is frustrating because you can't see what they're going to do. They're not winding up an attack when they just cancel a new one. To beat Fireboy, all you have to do is back up from mid distance to long distance and he'll charge you and do the same attack over and over. And you can use his you can use his animation cancel against him. Because every time he tries to buff himself in second phase, I just back up and then he's like, oh, he's too far away, let me charge at him again. And then you get 2 hits, you back up, charges again. You can keep doing this. There's no point in learning this boss. I didn't have to learn this boss. I didn't learn anything. The only move I think this boss knows is to charge and go weep weep. Weep weep. Now after fighting those 2, we get to the red twin boys that are conjoined, and at first it was a pretty neat way to get into their fight. They look like intimidating, but then I realized he's only got 2 combos. He's okay, he's got 2 combos. He leaves a good opening, he's parryable, you know, it's alright. This is the first boss I have ever seen in my history that actually gets super easy in second phase. He becomes so easy in second phase that I actually don't understand. So in the first phase, this man has 2 combos, like I said, really easy to get around. Nothing that's really crazy, nothing. If you have a weapon that has reach, like I use the mace, you're totally fine. Then he has his little conjoined twin buddy. His little conjoined twin buddy is kind of annoying because they'll backtrack and start shooting you from afar. That's annoying to deal with. I had to actually think on my feet. That's kind of neat. But when you get the second phase, you kill the conjoined thing on his chest and he begins the rage. And you have this weird little camera zoom in. Looks kind of weird, doesn't it? But he becomes easier because now he's locked out of all the animations he's locked out of the combos and the shooting that involve the twin. So he loses half his moveset and then only does 2 moveset again. I wanted to say 1 because it feels like 1, but they're slightly different. He will constantly just walk towards you in a rage state, like you made fun of his pompadour. he won't do anything until you're in range, and you can just backstep, get 2 hits, backstep, wait, 2 hits, backstep, or do the porcupine technique and just keep getting him with knockdown, getting 2 more hits over and over. He is no threat in second phase. He hits you once, ow, dude. You comboed me. Like, it... I can't believe that this was the boss of the most annoying dungeon of the game. Every final boss and every game, I think, needs to be the pinnacle of the game. It needs to be like visually some of the coolest things going on in that game, or it has to really test you. In Souls, Dark Souls 3 had such a great final boss. Like, you fighting all the players basically from DS1. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice set piece. Super good. It wasn't that challenging to me, at least, but it was super cool. Sekiro, epic fight. Also, that boss had every single thing in his arsenal. You had to be able to do everything in your kit to fight him. I enjoyed the shit out of that. This man runs the fuck away because he's a giant chicken and looks like a goddamn chicken. All it does is run away, jumps in on you, does one of 2 things. You get 2 hits, and then he jumps backwards. Then he might summon ads that die in 2 hits. It is the most frustrating thing because it's not fighting a boss, it's fighting your own sanity to hit something over and over. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to outplay the boss. I'm just waiting for him to get within my range so I can beat up that boss. I don't like it. It's dumb. I hated it. And then I kept getting this graphical glitch that would turn half the arena into a black hole that I couldn't see anything. It looked like he kept summoning minions into a hole in the ground and they would give him health. So you had to ride the hole, hurt the minions, wait for him to get back up. You might do that a couple times. This was just generally the most frustrating thing I've ever had to deal with. Now, Mortal Shell was made by 4 damn people in about 3 years. That alone is pretty impressive considering dev hell, and it's 4 people. I know they all worked on Ghost of Tsushima, but mainly all I could see was their art directors. So this is pretty impressive to me, and it gives me more of a leeway on their ability, and this, I think, is a good game of a nice rock. So if you get a Mortal Shell 2, they could probably make it into like a really good game. I can see that. But this one, not the best. I was very happy to get into it. It felt nice. There's a lot of Souls homage to it. Even the damn loading screens look like from Souls. It was nice. It was a nice little break from the Souls-likes and the other ones and anything produced by Deck 13. Okay. Oh, I'd rather go through Mortal Shell again than the Surge. Boss fights, though, pretty lackluster. Again, one of the 4 main ones is the only one I enjoy doing. That one was fun to record again. The other ones are just more of a... Alright. Backstep. Or the boss takes that epic backstep maneuver and uses that against you and just keeps backstepping on you and you only get 2 hits in. Again, I just talked about this, hated it. Also, parry system kind of throws me off because you have a hardening system that I think should already be worked into a parry. I don't think we need a separate button for it. The next thing, this game handles obtaining weapons in a great way. I really enjoy seeing exactly what it is, fighting an NPC for it. That's basically the NPC player. That's one of the best things I loved about Bloodborne is when I'm getting jumped by a damn boss, or I'm sorry, invaded by a thing. I know I'm getting it set, or I'm going to be able to get some of it set. I'm always excited to see that stuff. Bottom line, this game, if it's like $10, you probably have a good time out of it. It's decent for Souls-likes. Very hard to be a good Souls-like, very easy to be a bad one. It does a lot of some of what Souls-likes like to miss, like shortcuts in the area design, enemy design. Yeah, there's nothing really wrong with enemy design in this one, but boss design is the most lackluster, which I think is the most important thing in any Souls-like, and for that I rate you above Deck 13.